have to repeat what you said. All right, Jerry, you were grabbing at that microphone. Go ahead and add in if you'd like.
Going to ask, does the city have a central place online for information? And I'm thinking specifically of, is there a blog that sort of captures everything from all of the departments, information that would be relevant for people to know? Does that exist?
I'll take this one, Luke. The main city website, all of the department heads send information and programming updates to for updating. But most departments, we also have our own individual websites and Facebook pages and all the other layers of social media pages. Some departments are more robust than others in what they promote and share. So it's not foolproof.
And is there a mailing list, an email mailing list that citizens can sign up for at this point?
There is, through the city's website, you can get alerts. It's more for emergency than everyday programming. So like you wouldn't get a story time notification through the main city website. But if there is something of a more urgent nature happening, a broken water main, say, you would get an alert that's saying.
So in the online business space, email lists are considered really basic and also the most valuable piece of online communication, because the open rates and the engagement rates are higher with that than any other form of electronic communication. Direct mail might be even better, but setting up a blog that captures the highlights, not everything. We don't need to know about the details of the sewer or some TIF proposal or something, but the top level stuff that people might want to know about. One central place online that people can go to get that information. And typically with a blog, those articles can be tagged so that they're easy to find later. And then an email list, kind of a newsletter format. The library does a good job of that with their email newsletter.
We have about somewhere between 300 and 400. I'm not sure what the specifics are this month, but we have a pretty robust list. And Park Rec also does a monthly newsletter. I believe they are around 200. I'd have to ask Patrick again for updated stats on that, but.
So in terms of letting people know about other services that are available, it might be helpful to have a unified newsletter and then really promote that, maybe with some direct mail pieces or something. This may be more specific than you want to get in a comprehensive plan though, so.
Just because with community ed, we're always reviewing how we get communication out there. And so this media is really important as far as electronic. We still have really strong data though that a print format is needed. And so even if they overlay and we get the same feedback from our community and our survey results with the school district, as far as even communicating in the district, how do you find out your information? There's still a significant population that need that print format. So we can't rely on just one system we can overlap them and layer them, but our data for the district and for any educational programs across the state is that print format is still very important at some level. Even to point them into what we have electronically available for them.
Thanks, and those are really good, almost mass communication to the general public. How about how we reach out to individual organizations or reach out and partner with individuals who are providing services in our communities? Do you feel that the city is communicating well with you? Do you feel that we are aligned in our goals? Do we even have regular communication aside from individual personality connections that you have? How could that be improved?
With that, I think about the chamber as being, a key partner there. So I'm an example of someone who works in Winona and Rochester, and I live in Fillmore County. So for me to be aware of what's going on, in all of the region, the chambers of commerce, as far as the business connections, I think are really key. And I can see here they're a major player. I serve as an ambassador with the Winona Chamber. And so any of those overlap connections, I think, make a difference. And all organizations have their own, as we've said, means of communication and outreach. So it's a matter of, communities that can provide a comprehensive, here are those resource and key players. And I don't know if there would be a common landing page as such, or maybe the city already could provide that within their portal. I end up going, when I'm looking for specific information, I hop from site to site, as someone who doesn't live here. So, I'm not sure that maybe could be just a dream of how there could be one umbrella landing page that would then serve as the funnel to all the different areas of connection and communication.
Kevin, you've unmuted. It looks like you were going to say something.
Yeah, I'm going to preface my comments with, this is not a complaint. I just want to explain I don't know if I'm a good person to explain this or a terrible person to explain this. I moved here about 2 years ago. And, I now run a school district basically, or like a small public charter school. I found it very, very unusual. Like when we were scheduling fire drills, I said, hey, does the fire department come when we do at least one of these drills a year? No, the answer was no, that's never happened. When I was having a conversation about just like the police liaisons and how that worked in the local community, there wasn't a connection. And so I was reaching out to the public resource officers. They've been great. What I'm trying to explain is that there was a total absence of a community connection as a person who moved here and then was in charge of an institution. Just in terms of the only connection point was actually related to the pandemic. So when it comes to these suggestions about the information officer, I'm in like total agreement. And I don't know what the solution is, because I'd rather be having that conversation, but I found it very, very interesting that I had really almost no, I don't want to say outreach, but from what I've seen and experienced in other places, there was a big piece that was missing in terms of what that looked like. It was nicely filled by the pandemic response. We had these, weekly meetings in terms of from Winona County Health. And so that was very beneficial, but I still feel like disconnected. So I don't want you to think that's a complaint. I just want to explain that that's been my experience, is I feel something critical is missing there. And I wish I had the solution.
Areas for improvement, never complaints, areas for improvement. Any other thoughts on how we can communicate better with different organizations or those who are providing critical services in our community?
Has there ever been a thought to have a roundtable of critical community organizations, maybe once a year or even twice a year? I'm just thinking about just even observing the interaction at this meeting and the previous meeting and how productive that seemed to be. Even if it's just a social thing with a light agenda, has that ever happened?
I think that we've typically relied on other organizations doing that, like the nonprofit roundtable. But I don't know that the city has necessarily convened that on a regular basis, and that would be a really good suggestion.
I think that suggestion is spot on in terms of, things like the police chief, the fire chief. We don't have much connection with even the other public schools. The other charter schools I talk with frequently, but, and I don't know if it's some kind of perception of competition or what, but, I think that is a brilliant idea to just say, and even I can say selfishly, if that corresponded with our school year, it'd be very nice. But I think that's a very good idea.
Similar.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Similar to that, I've been asked to speak in what would be convened kind of like a downtown alliance organization that, a once a month you zoom in, and it would be a representation of all of the different areas that we've been speaking of this morning. And it's really a share out. The goal is of just raising awareness and communication. amid all of the e-newsletters and online calendars that we all get so consumed and often miss. So, you know, that type of informal, but yet it's just a template agenda, but it really has been impactful, I think, for improving communication.
All right, if you guys don't mind, we're going to jump down to education. So for public and elected officials about program funding needs and outcomes. And I imagine that there are probably some questions like, what do we do currently? Do we currently have education components for those elements? And Carlos is grabbing a microphone, so maybe I'll let him talk here.
And so part of this, I heard a lot at the last meeting just about programming funding needs and the importance of that, of course, not just to, you know, continue what we have right now, but to improve what we have right now. And the difficulty it can be is meeting people's expectations, of course, with the funding that you have. The other portion about it too that came to my mind and that I wanted to include is just how we educate the public about what funding these programs does for people. And really just looking for your input on how we could better communicate outcomes from the funding that is provided to places like the library on mental health, you know, for programming related to free and reduced lunch or like the lunch bus type of thing. You know, how do we better communicate the outcomes so maybe you can help garner some more support for funding some of these programs. So that's what I was looking for, is some input on that and how you maybe already communicate outcomes or your ideas on how it could be better communicated so that people can be educated and maybe perhaps better understand what their money is going to and how it impacts people on an individual level. Sell this a little bit better to a certain extent. It's not, I don't want to trivialize that by saying sell it, but like I'm just thinking like an infographic of, you know, X number of people help buy $1 of this, you help 12 people, that type of thing.
It's the return on investment piece.
I don't want to use financial terms for community service, but that's kind of what I'm getting at.
People pay attention to though. And that, I mean, when you're looking for people to vote on different things, that's a talking point. So, and that's a lot of data collection as well. Like even the number of kids that we would serve lunch at HRA and the impact that has on them, correlate that with what we know good nutrition does for kids educationally and what it does for people's budget. But that's dialing in on those numbers. That's where you get some of those good media points to talk about when you want to promote some of these programs. Just talk about that program. When we feed 40 kids, saves this many families this much money on average. And that's, you know, those things then start catching people's attention. Takes time to put that together.
In there, is there a good data report or feedback loop already in place that we could latch on to or become a part of, either as the city or the city reporting out, that you see as valuable? Not to add onerous other things, but if there's already, for example, a year-end report or a biannual report, that might be really beneficial for elected leaders or appointed leaders to become aware of.
I know of some larger statewide year in review reports for I can speak to public librarianship statistics. It's just digesting it and kind of pulling out what's relevant to Winona County, which we do have access to some means of creating some other reports through Selco. I'm sure the school district also would have something similar.
About your membership rate or the number of people you have walk through the door. There's got to be data that's connected to that. I'm thinking too, even with East End Rec Center. So we need to figure that out. But even some of the data collection on the number of kids that are served there. You know, as far as the school district, you can't correlate specific behavior incidents reports with kids that are showing up there, but you can like geographically that serves this part of the community, and this school boundary for that has these type of needs. And so we're typically serving these type children with these needs, because you can correlate your free and reduced to a certain part of your community. And we can correlate test scores to a certain part of your community. So if the library knows that they're serving this population really well and test scores are here, there's some ways to use that without giving up personal information on kids. It'd be group information. Because you can do it by school boundaries or by age groups. Like if you know that you're getting this many high school students in there, and you know that you can pull it out that way as well. And we serve this many free and reduced high school students, we can pull it out. We could correlate some of that information. And that's why that service is important. I mean, then you can tie it into some education for the community as well.
I have seen where some communities use kind of a community forum platform as a once a month. And then the highlight, maybe there's one organization, public health or library, whichever it be, that for that month is doing their 20-minute, 30-minute, here we are, this is, kind of show and tell, right? And raising awareness, and that's open not only to business industry, but also to public, to, it's just very broadly broadcasted, so that anyone that wants to be in person or Zoom in or whatever it would be, I mean, that could be a way to, it also then helps in unifying the businesses and the organizations across, and kind of hearing each other, hearing the needs of each. And then the last 20 minutes could just be Q&A. And if no one has questions or input, then you close. But that's just an idea. Again, it kind of tags on to what I was thinking about with, the Downtown Alliance kind of, or whatever entity coordinating, if it's a city that coordinates that.
When you talk about that, Julie, too, we have quite a few new administrators starting in the district this year, and they're not from our community. And so having that type of a situation would be a great onboarding process for them to learn more about Winona and about how public health serves them, or about how some of the different programs that are within the city serve the population of students they have, because they are not native to the community. And it takes a long time to get those relationships. Tina and I know each other, that type of thing. So I know who to call. And if she sends me an email, I pop it open because I know that it's something. It takes a long time to get those, but having something like that would speed up that process, because at least you'd have a name and a connection and then a face for that. That would be a great opportunity for a lot of our new administrators to find out more about their community.
Well, and that's interesting too. Chamber has network night for businesses and, chamber representatives. Visit Winona put on recently something related to hospitality industries in downtown, which I was a part of as part of the beer garden downtown. And that was great. But it seems to be that there isn't something like that in the community service realm. Okay.
Rotary has a weekly or monthly meeting, and they always ask for it. That's the library does show and tell for the Rotary. somewhat but a broader base that would hit more of the nonprofit sector or the community service sector would be great.
And I also too think about the county's program, the state health improvement program, and if there would be the potential for, to obtain grant money to hire somebody to come in and compile some of that data, because it sounds like the data is out there. It's just pulling it together, packaging it, and presenting it. Is that kind of where the real time suck is to a certain extent?
We can use money for evaluation. I'm not sure if that would be evaluation in this specific realm, though. I'd have to check.
Okay. I'm sorry, Kelsey. I didn't see your name there at first because I just swung in here. So I apologize. I guess I could have asked you point blank a little bit more about that. But yeah, I wasn't sure if some of the SHIP money might be able to help with, some of this convening potentially, and just from a health improvement for the community perspective. So I guess that's not something you necessarily need to answer right now, but just something that I was thinking about. So.
All right, I want to thank you all for those great thoughts on education, and we're going to flow that right into funding for the services that are provided. So how can we be supportive of each other? How can we directly support or partner? What are your thoughts related to funding and how you see community service groups or institutions in our community struggling, successfully doing things? I'd love to hear from all of you. You guys are pretty broad-based across the community. So what are your thoughts? How would you like the city to interplay with that?
It would be great if the city had a program with a grant writer. I'm not sure whether that would be a staff position or something that would be coordinated by the city and maybe supported by different nonprofit organizations in town. And the rest of you would be better able to address this than me. I just know with our work with helping these new refugees coming to town, we've been looking at applying for grants, and the wall we run into is finding someone with expertise in grant writing to help with that funding. So if there was some kind of a community position or a shared position, that would be helpful. Do y'all have your own grant writers like the library, or?
We do our own grant writing on staff, depending on what the grant is for and who has that expertise in the building. So typically the librarians or myself are the writers.
I think that's pretty common for most of the city departments, is we all do our own grant writing internally. I don't think we have a set grant writer for the city or even for a resource for community groups, which is a great suggestion. Any other thoughts related to funding besides just a grant writer position? Kevin, I see an unmute. You're ready to go.
Well, I think the suggestion just absolutely nailed it. This is a problem we have where, of course, we're always looking for grants, but part of it is timing, part of it is who writes for it. A lot of it is missing things or finding out things about like, hey, this grant is up. Oh, it's due tomorrow. So I'm in 100% agreement in terms of if that was a piece that we could share, contribute to, participate in, we would be all over that.
Just wonder if it wouldn't pay for itself in terms of the number of dollars brought in, even in terms of city departments. My understanding is that sometimes someone with really professional background and with more time to pay attention to what grants are available might be more effective. And so maybe if it was available to city departments, but then also available to local organizations for a fee, or some kind of a buy-in, maybe that would help cover the funding for that.
In the district, we used to have grant writers years ago. It'd be interesting if I could find out when that was. I've been there long enough now that I can't always put them in a time frame, but I know that they were eliminated because they not only have to bring in the funding for the programs, but then also to pay for themselves to justify it. I could maybe tap into our finance director, see if she remembers when we eliminated and exactly what the process was and why. But we did have a specific, for a while, specific grant writing position. It's like thinking that you're going to be volunteer to do that, Jerry, when you first started talking about it.
Any other? Oh, Kevin, go ahead.
Well, in the community that I moved from, one of my former colleagues, she's in, admittedly, the district is a little bit bigger than ours, but it's probably comparable to Winona Public Schools. They created a position that was partially grant writing, but it's also partially like student volunteering, but then it also include like student internships, and it was a bit of a mixed position, but it's one of those things where it was relatively, I feel like it's probably about 3 years old right now, but they are experiencing enormous success with that. So even if that position didn't look like it was 100% grant writing, but if it was, say, outreach to the school districts or, any combination of things, I think that that could be a very powerful piece.
So aside from seeking out grants, how would you all like to discuss future funding opportunities or future ways to facilitate your programs? Think creatively outside the box. It can be anything related to going after state funds and legislatures and being part of a bonding bill and communication amongst organizations for that. Any thoughts related to those types of elements?
Well, I'm going to go back to Julie's idea of a local community meeting, whatever format it might be, to promote some of our different programs, but that's a great opportunity to invite our state legislation to hear about the programs, to hear about the needs and the community feedback about those programs as well. Because that would be a great time to invite local legislative people to the table, whether it's a county commissioner or a city council or state or federal level. That would be a great opportunity for them to hear about the needs of those programs as well, because that's another level of addressing funding. And we don't have that right now. I mean, I'm constantly reaching out to people, but it's not an organized situation. It's a individual. And that's just me at one time. And it would be great to have a more community platform.
Any other thoughts before we move on to our next element? Julie.
I'm just thinking of other umbrella organizations and I'm not aware, and maybe Winona City is involved in the Southern Minnesota Initiative Foundation, SMIF, and at whatever level they are all the time. Okay, so that's great to know. And they could also, you know, potentially lead us to other sources of support and funding.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll move on to the next one. We are about 40 minutes through our meeting here, so we're making good progress. Appreciate it. Number 4 that we listed is importance of services after a crisis. So to a certain extent, there seems to be the resources there if somebody's having, you know, an immediate situation to be able to help that person out. But it's the months or time after that situation occurs that are just as important. And I'm just wondering about your thoughts on that and the importance of those services after a crisis, and how those could be potentially improved for people that are experiencing something and going through something that lasts longer than just that one crisis point. So just any thoughts on that and how we could maybe improve that or address that in our community?
Example of a situation that you're talking about. I mean, I'm thinking typically wouldn't like Winona County Social Services be the coordinator for someone in crisis? What are you thinking of in terms of what the city's dealing with?
Well, what I'm thinking of is something that came up again and again and again in our first round of public engagement is just the need for mental health services, you know. And so somebody has a mental health break point, you know, where they need to go for a 72-hour hold or something like that. You know, what services are available after that? You know, maybe that's the extreme, you know, but somebody finds something where at some point they know they need to seek out help, but what are the resources after that one point of contact?
And is the county not the lead on that?
I'm not sure. That's part of Luke and I and our naivete to a certain extent when it comes to this topic, and so that's kind of where we're looking to those who are present here to kind of help us out with that, because that's what we're hearing, and we want to see if there's a way we can translate that into potential goals or objectives or strategies in the comp plan. For instance, are there ways that the city could be involved as a convener or something like that to help provide those services on a more long-term basis? Not the city providing it necessarily, but at least being able to help facilitate those who currently do those work in those areas to be able to connect with the people they need to connect with.
I could add on in that area. So right away when I read number 4, my mind did go to mental health crises. And my example is local. So one of the curriculum that we help facilitate and bring trainers is mental health first aid. If you're aware of that program, similar to CPR on the physical side. So our certified trainers, we just in this past year went through a training series with one of our local manufacturers. We also went through a training series with the City of Winona police and emergency responders. So our certified staff facilitated that. Within the just months of going through both of these training series, there was an example at this manufacturer where one of their employees was in crisis. Those who were on site at the manufacturer site, being equipped with that training, felt really that they could respond. In this instance, the police department from Winona came, being that they were also trained in the similar method, approach, and terminology. There was just really the people there that needed to be there, and the right services were in place. It was just a real story of people being equipped with the right skills to respond in crisis. And so those type of services, however we can cross educate, provide training across departments, it just again strengthens the community in so many ways.
Kelsey, we see your very formal hand raise.
Sorry, I always feel really awkward speaking up on Zoom, so I thought I'd just raise my hand. So something you are all probably aware of is that Winona Health, Live Well Winona have the Winona Community Hub, where they have quite a few community health workers and are also partnered with all sorts of organizations in the community to help people address social determinants of health, because you can't be healthy if you don't have housing, or you can't be healthy fully if you're still addicted to smoking cigarettes. So something that could possibly be done after an event or after a crisis is that person could then get a referral to the community hub, and then that would assign them with a community health worker that would help them address any of the needs they may have: food insecurity, housing insecurity, mental health, all sorts of things that could be contributing to their overall well-being. Just an idea. I don't know if that's possible, but
I just met with the hub group and am going to be joining them, and will be able to then directly refer. Once you are part of their team and part of their program, then you can have your direct referral line, and then you don't have to go from person to person. And I think that was the hugest thing, is you got to go here, you got to fill out this. If your organization is willing to be partners with them and organize with them and work with them, they will give you the direct referral permission, and then everything that you directly refer gets sent right to the social worker or the caseworker, or immediate. It's not rerouted. And so I think a timely manner is huge with this. I've have a huge problem with mental health and mental illness at the HRA and how we deal with things. I mean, there's been times that I've waited with the police for the crisis team to show up because they're hour away, and who knows what this person is doing inside that apartment, and what do we do in that time frame? None of us were trained. We were all waiting for that crisis person to come. So I think training is so huge, and getting the right people trained, and letting people know what's out there and where to go for situations, because I don't think a lot of people do know.
It sounds like maybe providing that mental health first aid training to city staff and any organizations, that might be something the city could do, would be to facilitate that, basically sign up. I can think of even just our own all volunteer organization, refugee resettlement. There are lots of mental health concerns there. On another related topic, I just know we have a real shortage of mental health professionals in this town. And I've run into that again and again. I actually went to try and get a referral for adult ADD screening and was told it's a year wait for that. Trying to get my son, who was having some anxiety issues, signed up with someone. Nearly everyone was full. So, and I see lots of heads nodding. I don't know what the city can do about that, but it seems pretty basic. I also know that Catholic Charities here in town had an open position for a counselor and just been having a hard time getting a hold of anyone to take that position.
I have to try to remember two thoughts here. One of them is there, and because I sit on a couple of different boards and we work with Hiawatha and FCC closely with different things. They can't fill positions. And even when they do get people trained, just like we are not a big enough community to be able to hold them long as soon as they get that training, because there's such a lack of trained professionals in that area. They get pulled by a little bit larger communities with better benefits and more housing and more resources. And, so some of that goes back to strengthening our housing and strengthening other resources in our community to get them to want to stay. Because that's licensed teachers, that's a lot of different positions. I'm guessing your police and law enforcement, unless they're tied to the community, can get pulled to different communities that are larger and pay better as well. Then my second thought is there a social worker that's assigned to work with the first responders and to law enforcement? Is that a position? Because the hub is a great thing and I sit on the board of that too, and we are a partner with them and it's growing, and the skill building with the hub is impressive to me for how long I've sat on the board from the beginning to where we're at now. But if we had that social work position with law enforcement and with our first responders in our fire department to transition them to the hub, that would be a huge stepping stone. That would help those families after crisis, because the resources are there. There's not enough mental health. I totally agree with that. I think there's a ton of different agencies that have openings in our community. But if we had that social work position that would take those calls and transition them to the hub that can then help have that one person that they have to work with, that would be a nice liaison position that would be a really good investment in our community and our funding.
It's a great suggestion. Kevin, I've seen you on mute a couple of times, so why don't you jump in?
Yeah, there's kind of a theme of coordination there that I just wanted to piggyback off of. And from the school perspective, I wanted to kind of reframe it in terms of it's listed as importance of services after a crisis. One of the pieces I feel like we could definitely put a focus on, which is basically the importances of services before the crisis. And I feel like there could be a very clear pathway through potential events, whether they're individual or whether they're group or whether they're community. I feel like that would be a very important thing. And I can just speak to the beginning of the school year. It'd be very nice to say, hey, here's what a response looks like to a flood event or an armed intruder event, but it actually involves like, hey, for some strange reason, this service is booked out. What's plan B, plan C, then just knowing like who those community partners are and becoming familiar with them. So I'm with you on board 100% with the mental health and everything people are saying. I feel like there could be a coordination piece there that really targets, events before they happen and then follows the pathway through.
Also a great suggestion. The conversation is going really well. I know we've said, oh, we just have these 7 themes to get through. We're almost at our hour. I want to look at our next meeting and maybe we should schedule it for the end of July rather than going into August so that we can continue this conversation and then head into those goals and objectives. I got a bit too ambitious with our agenda, obviously. If we were to look about 2 weeks out, would everybody be available to do the 27th at 12 o'clock? I'm getting a head shake from one person. Oh no. We can go into the first week of August if some of you have to do that. That's fine. So the first Wednesday in August. And don't do this to me. So what day is that on that Friday? It's okay. We have some votes for Monday the 1st at 12 p.m. Monday the 1st at 12 p.m. I'm seeing head nods. Everyone feels pretty good. No. Oh my gosh. Is later in the day satisfactory? So should we say 2:30? 2:30, Monday the 1st. I'm glad that we did take some time to do that. Do we want to continue talking here and move on to our next item? Are there left slots related to after crisis care? Kevin, I see you unmuting.
No, I just have to duck out. So thank you, everybody. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Well, we'll go ahead and end here and we'll tackle those final 3 themes at the next meeting. And then we'll make sure that we also move into those goals and objectives and begin getting those formulated at the end of August so that we can send them on to the steering committee in September. Thank you all very much for your time.